The blazing sun beat down on Willow Lockhart's pale complexion as she felt her world spiral out of control, her hands clutching desperately at the saddle horn while her chestnut mare thundered across the open plain with no sign of slowing. It was supposed to be a simple afternoon ride in 1875, Abilene, Texas, not the terrifying struggle for survival it had become. Her heart pounded against her ribs as the wind tore at her honey blonde hair, pins flying free as the once docile horse beneath her transformed into an unstoppable force of raw panic. The rattlesnake that had startled Penny was long behind them, but the damage was done. Each desperate tug on the reins only seemed to agitate the horse further, driving her faster across the dusty terrain. "Whoa, Penny, please!" Willow screamed, her voice lost in the rushing wind and thundering hooves. Her silk riding skirt flapped wildly, torn at the hem from catching on brush. The town of Abilene had disappeared behind her, replaced by endless Texas scrubland that offered no sanctuary. Terror seized her lungs as Penny headed straight for a rocky outcropping. At this speed, one misstep would mean certain death for both of them. Willow closed her eyes, silently praying for a miracle as tears streamed down her face. The miracle came in the form of thundering hooves approaching from her left. A deep voice called out over the cacophony, "Hang on, miss." Opening her eyes, Willow glimpsed a tall figure on a powerful black stallion rapidly closing the gap between them. The cowboy's hat was pulled low, his expression determined as he pushed his mount to match Penny's frantic pace. Lucas Caldwell had been heading back to the Diamond Sea Ranch when he spotted the runaway horse and its terrified rider. Without hesitation, he dug his heels into his stallion Shadow's flanks, urging him to a full gallop. Now, as he rode alongside the panicked mare, he could see the fear in the young woman's eyes, wide and blue as a summer sky. "I'm going to grab your reins," he shouted over the pounding hooves. "Keep steady." Willow could only nod, her knuckles white from gripping the saddle horn. The stranger leaned dangerously from his saddle, his powerful arm stretching toward Penny's bridle. Once, twice he reached, missing as the mare jerked her head. On the third attempt, his fingers closed around the leather straps. With a strength born of years working cattle, Lucas pulled steadily on the reins, careful not to yank too suddenly. "Easy, girl, easy now," he called in a deep, soothing tone that somehow cut through Penny's panic. The mare fought against his control, but Lucas held firm, gradually applying more pressure. "That's it, nice and slow," he continued, his voice a calm anchor in the storm of Willow's fear. The horses began to slow, from a gallop to a canter, then finally to a trot before stopping altogether in a small clearing. When they finally halted, Willow found herself trembling so violently she couldn't speak. Lucas quickly dismounted and moved to her side, reaching up to help her down. "You're safe now, miss. I've got you," he said, his hands spanning her waist as he lifted her effortlessly from the saddle. The moment her feet touched the ground, Willow's legs buckled. Lucas caught her against his chest, supporting her weight easily. She could feel the solid strength of him, smell the leather and sunshine on his clothes, and for a moment, all she could do was breathe. "Thank you," she finally whispered, looking up into the face of her rescuer for the first time. Lucas Caldwell wasn't handsome in the conventional sense. His face was too weathered from years under the Texas sun, his jaw too square, his nose slightly crooked from being broken once. But his eyes, a warm amber that reminded Willow of honey in sunlight, were kind, and the slight curve of his mouth as he smiled down at her made something flutter in her chest. "Lucas Caldwell, madam," he introduced himself, still holding her steady. "Foreman at the Diamond Sea." Willow Lockhart, she replied, her voice steadier now. I'm staying with my aunt in Abilene. I don't know what happened. Penny's usually so gentle. Lucas released her once he was sure she could stand, then turned to examine the mare who now stood docile and blowing hard, sides heaving from the exertion. Something must have spooked her good. Rattlesnake, maybe, Willow nodded. Yes, just after we crossed Miller's Creek. I couldn't. To her mortification, tears welled in her eyes again. Hey now, Lucas said gently, pulling a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offering it to her. You did just fine. Most folks would have been thrown before I could reach them. As Willow dabbed at her eyes, she noticed Lucas examining Penny with expert hands, checking the mare's legs and hooves. She seems all right, just winded. We should walk them both back slowly. Give them a chance to cool down proper. How far are we from town? Willow asked, looking around at the unfamiliar landscape. About 5 miles, Lucas replied, glancing at the sun's position. We won't make it back before dusk at a walking pace. Willow felt a flutter of panic. My aunt will be frantic. I was only supposed to be gone for an hour. Lucas nodded, understanding her concern. There's a line shack about a half-mile east of here. We can stable the horses there and I can ride ahead to let your aunt know you're safe. No, Willow said quickly, surprising herself with her vehemence. I mean, please don't leave me alone, not after. Understanding softened his features. All right then. We'll send a message from the Dawson place. It's closer than the line shack and Mrs. Dawson will be glad for the company. Relief washed over Willow. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. Lucas, he corrected with a small smile. After what we've been through, I reckon we can skip the formalities. They began walking, leading their horses side by side. Willow was acutely aware of the tall man beside her, the easy confidence in his stride. She'd been in Abilene only 2 weeks, sent by her father to stay with her aunt after her mother's passing. The trip from Boston had been meant as a temporary respite from grief, a chance to heal away from the constant reminders of her loss. So, Miss Lockhart, what brings you to Abilene? You don't strike me as a local, Lucas said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. Is it that obvious? Willow asked with a small smile. Lucas gestured to her riding habit, the fine fabric and Eastern cut unmistakable despite the dust and tears. Just a hunch. I'm visiting my Aunt Martha Ellsworth. She married a cattle baron and moved here 20 years ago. Recognition flickered in Lucas's eyes. The Circle E, that's your uncle's spread. Yes, though he passed away 3 years ago. Aunt Martha runs it now. Lucas whistled low. Your aunt is something of a legend around these parts. Not many women take on running a ranch that size, especially not with the success she's had. Pride warmed Willow's chest. She's remarkable. My father always said she was the true strength in the family. And you're cut from the same cloth. Lucas asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. Willow laughed, the sound surprising her after the terror of the afternoon. Hardly. I'm a city girl through and through. Before coming here, I taught music at a girls' school in Boston. Music, huh? Lucas smiled. What do you play? Piano primarily, though I can manage a violin if pressed. Do you play an instrument, Mr. Cal Lucas? She corrected herself with a shy smile. Just a harmonica and poorly at that, he admitted. Though I can carry a tune well enough around a campfire. As they walked, Lucas told her about growing up on ranches across Texas, working his way up from a boy who mucked stalls to foreman of one of the largest operations in the county. There was no boasting in his words, just simple facts delivered in his deep, steady voice. The sun was setting by the time they reached the Dawson homestead, a modest but well-kept farm with a small orchard. A plump, gray-haired woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. Lucas Caldwell, What brings you by at this hour?" "And with a young lady, no less," Mrs. Dawson called, her keen eyes taking in Willow's disheveled appearance. "Evening, Mrs. Dawson. This here is Miss Willow Lockhart, Martha Ellsworth's niece. We had a bit of trouble with a runaway horse, and I was hoping we might impose on your hospitality while I send word to her aunt." Mrs. Dawson immediately bustled forward, motherly concern replacing curiosity. "Land's sakes, child, you must be terrified. Come in, come in. My Thomas can ride to the Circle E while you get cleaned up." Within minutes, Willow found herself seated at the Dawsons' kitchen table, a cup of hot tea in her hands and a quilt around her shoulders. Mr. Dawson, a quiet man with kind eyes, had immediately saddled his horse upon hearing their predicament and ridden toward the Circle E to inform Martha of Willow's whereabouts. "Your young man saved you just in time, it seems," Mrs. Dawson said as she set a plate of biscuits before Willow. Heat rushed to Willow's cheeks. "Oh, Mr. Caldwell isn't we only just met today." Mrs. Dawson raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she bustled about the kitchen preparing dinner. Through the window, Willow could see Lucas tending to the horses, his movements efficient and gentle as he unsaddled Penny and checked her over once more. "He's a good man, that Lucas," Mrs. Dawson remarked, following Willow's gaze. "Not many like him left these days. Too many gunslingers and drifters passing through, but Lucas he's solid as they come." Willow sipped her tea, watching as Lucas led the horses to the Dawsons' small barn. There was something compelling about him, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with his physical prowess. When he'd pulled alongside her runaway horse, she'd seen no hesitation in his eyes, only determination and courage. Lucas joined them shortly, having seen to the horse's comfort. Mrs. Dawson insisted he stay for dinner, and soon they were seated around the table enjoying a simple but hearty meal of chicken stew and fresh bread. "So, Miss Lockhart," Mr. Dawson said as they ate, "how are you finding Texas compared to Boston?" Willow considered the question. "It's vaster than I expected, and hotter, but there's a beauty to it I hadn't anticipated. It grows on you," Lucas said with a small smile. "Gets under your skin until you can't imagine being anywhere else." "Is that what happened to you?" Willow asked, curious about this man who had saved her life. "Born and raised here," he replied. "Never had the chance to get homesick for anywhere else." The conversation flowed easily through dinner, and Willow found herself relaxing despite the day's trauma. There was something comforting about the Dawsons' small home, with its handmade quilts and simple furnishings so different from her father's ornate Boston townhouse or even her aunt's more opulent ranch house. After dinner, they moved to the porch to enjoy the cool evening air. The Texas sky stretched endless above them, stars appearing one by one in the deepening blue. Willow had never seen such stars, so bright and numerous they seemed close enough to touch. "It's beautiful," she murmured, gazing upward. "One of the things I love most about this country," Lucas agreed, his voice soft beside her. "No matter how rough the day's been, those stars remind you how small your troubles really are." The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their contemplation. Mr. Dawson stood, peering into the gathering darkness. "Looks like your aunt sent someone for you, Miss Lockhart." A carriage appeared on the road, driven by a man Willow recognized as her aunt's foreman, with Martha herself inside. Relief washed over Willow at the sight of her aunt's familiar face. "Thank goodness you're all right," Martha exclaimed as she exited the carriage, pulling Willow into a fierce embrace. When Thomas arrived with news of what happened, she broke off, emotion making her voice unsteady. "I'm fine, Aunt Martha, truly." "Thanks to Mr. Caldwell," Willow said, gesturing to Lucas who stood respectfully to one side. Martha turned to him, her expression softening. "Lucas Caldwell, I should have known if anyone would be in the right place at the right time, it would be you." Lucas ducked his head, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just happened to be riding by, madam." "Nevertheless, you have my deepest gratitude," Martha said firmly. "The Circle E is in your debt." After thanking the Dawsons profusely for their hospitality, Martha insisted that Lucas join them in the carriage for the ride back to town. "It's too late for you to be riding all the way to the Diamond Sea tonight. We have plenty of room, and I insist you stay as our guest." Lucas looked as though he might refuse, but a glance at Willow changed his mind. "Much obliged, Mrs. Ellsworth." The ride to the Circle E was spent recounting the day's events in more detail. Willow found herself downplaying her fear, not wanting to worry her aunt further, but Lucas's steady gaze told her he knew exactly how terrified she had been. The Circle E ranch house was a grand affair by Texas standards, a two-story structure with wide verandas and tall windows that caught the breeze. Built by her Uncle Edward with the proceeds from his first successful cattle drive, it stood as a testament to the fortune that could be made in the cattle business. Martha showed Lucas to a guest room, while her housekeeper Agnes fussed over Willow, insisting on drawing her a bath despite the late hour. As Willow sank into the warm water, she finally allowed the full weight of the day's events to settle over her. She had nearly died. If Lucas hadn't appeared when he did. She shuddered, closing her eyes against the thought. Later, wrapped in her nightgown and robe, Willow found herself unable to sleep. The memory of Penny's panicked run kept replaying in her mind, the feeling of helplessness as the ground rushed beneath them. Seeking distraction, she made her way downstairs to the library, hoping a book might calm her thoughts. She was surprised to find Lucas there, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He turned at her entrance, equally startled to see her. "Miss Lockhart." "I hope I didn't wake you," he said, setting his glass down. "No, I couldn't sleep," Willow admitted, tightening her robe self-consciously. "Every time I close my eyes, I'm back on that horse." Understanding flashed in Lucas's amber eyes. "That's normal after a scare like you had. It'll pass." "Does it? Pass, I mean." Willow moved further into the room, drawn to his calm presence. "Eventually, the sharp edges wear down, become something you can live with." There was something in his tone that suggested he spoke from experience. "Would you like some tea? I saw a kettle in the kitchen." Willow smiled at his thoughtfulness. "That would be lovely, thank you." They moved to the kitchen together, Lucas lighting a lamp while Willow filled the kettle. There was an easy domesticity to their movements, as if they'd shared this kitchen many times before. "Have you had many close calls like today?" Willow asked as they waited for the water to boil. Lucas leaned against the counter, considering her question. "A few. Working cattle is dangerous business. Been thrown, trampled, nearly drowned crossing a river during a drive. Yet you continue." It wasn't a question, but Lucas answered anyway. "It's what I know, what I'm good at." He shrugged, the movement drawing Willow's attention to the breadth of his shoulders. "And there's a freedom to it that's hard to find elsewhere." The kettle whistled, and Lucas moved to prepare her tea. His large hands looked incongruous holding the delicate china teacup, yet he handled it with unexpected grace. "What about you?" he asked, passing her the steaming cup. "Will today's adventure send you scurrying back to Boston?" Willow cradled the warm cup between her palms, considering. "I don't know. I came here to find some peace, I suppose. My mother passed away 3 months ago." "I'm sorry for your loss," Lucas said, genuine empathy in his voice. "Thank you. We were very close. After she died, everything in Boston reminded me of her. My father thought a change of scenery might help." She smiled ruefully. though I doubt he had runaway horses in mind when he suggested I visit Aunt Martha. Grief has a way of following you, no matter how far you run, Lucas said quietly. Lost my pa when I was 14. Thought joining a cattle drive would put some distance between me and the hurt, but it just came along for the ride. What helped in the end? Willow asked, touched by his candor. Time, work, finding purpose. Lucas met her eyes. And eventually realizing it's okay to build something new without forgetting what you lost. They talked until Willow's tea was gone and the kitchen clock chimed midnight. Despite the hour, she felt more at peace than she had in months, the terror of the afternoon's ride receding in the warm kitchen and Lucas's steady company. I should let you get some rest, Lucas said, taking her empty cup. Tomorrow we'll be here before you know it. Thank you. Not just for the tea, but for... Willow hesitated, uncertain how to express her gratitude for both his rescue and his understanding. You're welcome, Miss Lockhart. His smile was gentle. Sleep well. As Willow climbed the stairs to her room, she found herself wondering what it would be like to sit across from Lucas Caldwell every evening, sharing the day's events over tea in a kitchen of their own. The thought surprised her. She'd known the man less than a day, yet something about him called to her in a way no Boston gentleman ever had. Sleep came easier than she expected, and if she dreamed of amber eyes and strong hands reaching for her, well, that was her secret to keep. The next morning brought sunshine streaming through her curtains, and the distant sounds of ranch life, cattle lowing, men calling to one another as they went about their work. Willow dressed in one of her simpler day dresses, a pale blue muslin that was better suited to the Texas heat than many of the clothes she'd brought from Boston. When she descended to the dining room, she found her aunt and Lucas already at breakfast, engaged in animated conversation about cattle prices. "Good morning, dear," Martha said, her sharp eyes assessing Willow's appearance. "How are you feeling after yesterday's ordeal?" "Much better, thank you." Willow took a seat, accepting a cup of coffee from the housekeeper. She glanced at Lucas, who offered her a small smile that sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Lucas was just telling me about a new breeding program they're implementing at the Diamond Sea," Martha said, buttering a biscuit. "Quite innovative, really." "It's just an experiment," Lucas demurred, but Willow could see the pride in his eyes. "If it works, we'll have cattle better suited to the Texas climate and drought conditions." "You know a great deal about ranching for a foreman," Willow observed, intrigued by his knowledge. "Lucas is being modest," Martha interjected. "He's not just the foreman. He owns a 20% stake in the Diamond Sea these days. Walter Coleman may have the money, but everyone knows Lucas is the brains behind their operation." Color rose in Lucas's cheeks. "Mrs. Ellsworth gives me too much credit." "Nonsense. Credit where it's due." Martha turned to Willow. "Lucas started as a hand there 10 years ago. Worked his way up, saved every penny, and bought in when old Mr. Coleman's son wanted to sell his share and move east. Smart business, that." Willow studied Lucas with new interest. There was clearly more to this cowboy than she'd initially assumed. "That's impressive. You must be very dedicated to your work." "It's a living," Lucas said simply, but the spark in his eyes told her it was much more than that. It was his passion, his future. After breakfast, Lucas announced he needed to return to the Diamond Sea. "Mr. Coleman will be wondering what became of me." "At least let us send you with a proper mount," Martha insisted. "Your stallion deserves a rest after yesterday's heroics, and you must come to dinner Friday. I'm having a few neighbors over, and it would give us a chance to thank you properly." Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "That's kind of you, madam. I'd be honored." Before he departed, Lucas sought Willow out on the veranda where she'd gone to enjoy the morning air. "Miss Lockhart," he said, his hat in his hands. I wanted to make sure you were truly all right before I left. Willow smiled, touched by his concern. I am, thanks to you, though I may need some convincing before I get back on a horse. That's understandable, but you shouldn't wait too long. His expression grew serious. After a fall, or in your case, a scare, it's best to ride again soon or the fear takes root. Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Caldwell? She teased gently. A smile tugged at his mouth. It is, and if you'd allow it, I'd be happy to accompany you when you're ready to try again. Make sure you have a gentle mount and stay on safe trails. The offer warmed her. I'd like that. Though I fear I'd be poor company, trembling the whole way. I've ridden with worse company than a nervous Boston music teacher, he assured her, his eyes crinkling at the corners. At least you smell better than most cowboys after a long drive. Willow laughed, surprising herself with the sound. It had been so long since she'd felt light enough to laugh freely. How very gallant of you to say so. Lucas replaced his hat, tipping it slightly. Until Friday, Miss Lockhart. Until Friday, she echoed, watching as he mounted the horse Martha had lent him, a sturdy bay gelding with a white star on its forehead. As he rode away, Willow found herself already counting the days until she would see him again. The week passed more quickly than Willow expected. Her aunt kept her busy with ranch affairs, introducing her to the intricacies of cattle breeding, water rights, and the complex social hierarchy of Texas ranching families. It was a far cry from her life in Boston, where her days had been filled with music lessons and social calls. To her surprise, Willow found herself fascinated by ranch life. There was something refreshingly direct about the way people operated here. Problems were confronted head-on rather than hidden behind social niceties. And despite her initial terror, she found herself drawn to the wild beauty of the landscape, so different from the manicured gardens and crowded streets of home. Friday arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, and a gentle breeze that took the edge off the Texas heat. Martha's dinner party was a modest affair by Boston standards, just 3 neighboring ranching families and, of course, Lucas. Willow spent more time than usual preparing, selecting a gown of sage green silk that brought out the golden highlights in her hair and complemented her blue eyes. As she fastened a simple pearl pendant around her neck, her mother's last gift to her, she acknowledged to herself that her extra care was for Lucas's benefit. He arrived promptly at 6, dressed in what was clearly his best dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a vest of good quality, if somewhat out of Eastern fashion. His hair was neatly combed, still damp from washing, and he'd trimmed his beard. The sight of him making such an effort sent a flutter through Willow's stomach. "Miss Lockhart," he greeted her, his voice warming the simple address. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. You're looking quite distinguished yourself." She smiled, noting how his eyes lingered on her face. The evening progressed pleasantly, with good food and lively conversation. Lucas sat across from Willow at dinner, and she found her gaze drawn to him repeatedly throughout the meal. He spoke little, but when he did contribute, everyone at the table listened. There was a quiet authority to him that demanded respect without seeking it. After dinner, Martha suggested music. "Willow, dear, would you play for us? The piano hasn't been touched since you arrived, and it would be a shame to waste your talent." Willow hesitated only briefly before agreeing. It had been weeks since she'd played, not since before her mother's funeral. But tonight, with Lucas's eyes on her, she found herself wanting to share this part of herself. The piano was a decent instrument, well maintained despite Martha's lack of musical inclination. Willow settled onto the bench, took a deep breath, and began to play. She started with a chop-in nocturne, the melancholy notes filling the parlor. As her fingers moved across the keys, She felt the familiar sense of peace that music always brought her. When she finished, there was a moment of appreciative silence before applause broke out. Willow looked up to find Lucas watching her with an expression of such tender admiration that it took her breath away. "That was beautiful, Miss Lockhart," Mrs. Peterson, one of the dinner guests, said. "Would you play something more lively next? Perhaps something we could dance to?" Willow obliged with a popular waltz, smiling as couples formed and began to move around the cleared space in the center of the parlor. Martha was claimed by Mr. Peterson, while the Hansons and Johnstones partnered with their respective spouses. Lucas remained seated, watching the dancers with a small smile. Willow caught his eye as she played, raising an eyebrow in silent question. He shook his head slightly, mouthing, "Later," and she felt a thrill of anticipation. After 2 more dance tunes, Willow's fingers were beginning to tire. She transitioned into a final piece, another chop-in, this one bittersweet with longing. As the last notes faded, she felt rather than saw someone approach the piano. "Would you honor me with a dance, Miss Lockhart?" Lucas asked, his hand extended toward her. Willow looked up at him, surprised. "But there's no music." A small, mischievous smile curved his lips. "I think we can manage without." She placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her to the center of the room. The other guests watched with interest as Lucas placed one hand respectfully at her waist, holding her right hand in his left. He began to hum softly, a tune Willow didn't recognize, but found instantly appealing, something slow and sweet, with a distinctly Western lilt. They moved together with surprising ease, as if they'd danced 100 times before. Lucas was a better dancer than she'd expected, guiding her with gentle confidence. The room seemed to fade around them, leaving only the warm pressure of his hand at her waist and the soft melody he hummed just for her. "What song is that?" she asked quietly, not wanting to break the spell between them. "Just an old cowboy tune," he replied, his voice low. "My mother used to sing it. It's lovely." "Not as lovely as you look tonight," he said, his amber eyes holding hers. There was no practiced flattery in his words, just simple honesty that touched her more deeply than the most eloquent compliment from a Boston suitor ever had. The dance ended too soon, with Martha calling for coffee and dessert. As Lucas reluctantly released her, Willow felt as though something significant had shifted between them, a door opening to possibilities she hadn't considered before coming to Texas. The remainder of the evening passed in a pleasant blur. When the guests began to depart, Lucas lingered, clearly reluctant to end the evening. "Would you care to ride tomorrow, Miss Lockhart?" he asked as they stood on the veranda. "If you're feeling up to it." "Just around the ranch property, nothing too challenging." Willow hesitated, the memory of her runaway ride still fresh, but Lucas was right. The longer she waited, the harder it would be to overcome her fear. "Yes, I think I'd like that, if you're sure it's not an imposition." "No imposition at all." His smile was warm in the soft lamplight. "I'll come by around 10 if that suits." 10 would be perfect. Lucas took her hand, bowing slightly over it in a gesture that blended Eastern courtesy with Western sincerity. "Good night, Miss Lockhart. Thank you for the music. It's been a long time since I heard something so beautiful." His thumb brushed lightly across her knuckles before he released her, the brief touch sending warmth up her arm. "Good night, Mr. Caldwell. Safe ride home." Willow watched him mount up and ride away, staying on the veranda until his figure disappeared into the darkness. Behind her, she heard her aunt's approaching footsteps. "He's quite taken with you," Martha observed, no judgment in her tone. Willow turned, unable to hide her smile. "Is he?" Martha's knowing look made Willow blush. "Don't play coy, dear. It doesn't suit you. And unless I'm very much mistaken, the feeling is mutual." Rather than deny it, Willow simply asked, Would that be so terrible?" "Not terrible at all," Martha replied, linking her arm through Willow's as they walked back inside. "Lucas Caldwell is one of the finest men in the county. Your father might hope for some Boston businessmen for you, but out here, a man like Lucas is worth his weight in gold." "We've only just met," Willow protested weakly. "Sometimes that's all it takes," Martha said with a wisdom born of her own happy marriage. "Your uncle proposed to me after knowing me just 2 weeks. Said he knew from the first dance that I was the only woman he'd ever want." That night, Willow dreamed of dancing to a cowboy's hummed melody, of strong hands and amber eyes that saw straight through to her soul. True to his word, Lucas arrived at 10 the next morning, leading not only his own mount but a gentle-looking dappled mare. "This is Daisy," he told Willow as she approached, trying not to show her nervousness. "Sweetest tempered horse on the Circle E, according to your aunt's foreman. Perfect for rebuilding your confidence." Willow approached the mare cautiously, extending her hand to let Daisy sniff it. The horse's velvety nose tickled her palm, and Willow couldn't help but smile. "She seems nice." "She is, been used as a children's mount mostly, so she's patient and doesn't spook easy." Lucas watched Willow carefully. "We'll take it slow, just around the paddock at first, then maybe down to the creek if you're feeling comfortable." With Lucas's steady encouragement, Willow found the courage to mount. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the reins, but Daisy stood perfectly still, as if understanding her rider's fear. "That's it," Lucas praised as Willow settled in the saddle. "Just relax and let her feel your confidence." "What confidence?" Willow asked with a nervous laugh. Lucas smiled, mounting his own horse with easy grace. "The confidence you're pretending to have. Sometimes that's enough to start." They began with simple walking circuits of the paddock. Lucas rode beside her, close enough that he could grab Daisy's reins if needed, but giving Willow space to regain her seat and feel in control. His quiet, steady presence was reassuring, and gradually, Willow felt her tension ease, ready to try outside the paddock. He asked after they'd been riding for nearly half an hour. Willow took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, I think so." Lucas led them through a gate onto a well-worn trail that meandered through the Circle E's northern pastures. The day was perfect for riding, warm but not oppressively hot, with just enough breeze to keep them comfortable. Wildflowers dotted the grass in bursts of yellow and purple, and overhead, a hawk circled lazily on thermal currents. "It's beautiful out here," Willow said, beginning to enjoy herself despite her lingering nervousness. "Different from what you're used to, I expect," Lucas replied. "Very. Boston has its own beauty, but it's contained, cultivated. This feels wilder, more honest somehow." Lucas nodded his understanding. "First time I went east Kansas City for a cattle sale, I felt like I couldn't breathe right. Too many buildings, too many people. Couldn't see the horizon properly." "And yet people like my aunt adapt," Willow mused. "She seems completely at home here now, though she was born and raised in Massachusetts. Some people have that ability to put down roots wherever they land." Lucas glanced at her. "What about you, Miss Lockhart? Could you see yourself putting down roots in a place like this?" The question hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the simple words. Willow considered it carefully. A month ago, she would have dismissed the idea outright. Now, she wasn't so certain. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I've always imagined my life would be in Boston. My teaching, my friends, my father's business connections, everything I know is there. But, Lucas prompted gently when she paused. "But I haven't felt truly alive there since my mother died. Everything feels muffled somehow, like I'm viewing the world through a veil." Willow looked around at the vast Texas landscape. "Out here, even with the grief still fresh, I feel awake, present. Lucas's eyes softened. Grief changes us, forces us to see the world differently. Sometimes that's painful, but sometimes it opens doors we never would have noticed otherwise. They rode in companionable silence after that, following the trail as it wound through a stand of cottonwood trees and alongside a small creek. The water burbled cheerfully over rocks, creating a soothing backdrop to their journey. As they reached a particularly pretty spot where the creek widened into a shallow pool, Lucas suggested they stop to rest the horses. He helped Willow dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. They settled on a fallen log near the water's edge, watching as the horses drank from the clear pool. The intimacy of the moment, just the two of them in this peaceful spot, made Willow's heart beat faster. "May I ask you something, Mr. Caldwell?" she said, gathering her courage. "Lucas," he reminded her gently, "and yes, you may ask me anything." "Lucas," she amended, liking the feel of his name on her tongue. "Why aren't you married, a man in your position with your qualities? Surely you've had opportunities." If he was surprised by her directness, he didn't show it. "There was someone once. Rebecca Harper, daughter of a rancher north of here. We were engaged briefly when I was 23. "What happened?" Willow asked softly. "Influenza took her the winter before we were to be married." His voice was steady, but Willow could hear the old pain beneath the words. "After that, I threw myself into work. The Diamond Sea was struggling then, and focusing on saving the ranch gave me purpose when I needed it most." "I'm sorry," Willow said, instinctively reaching out to touch his hand. "That must have been devastating." Lucas turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "It was. For a long time, I couldn't imagine feeling that way about anyone else. Didn't want to risk it." His eyes met hers, and the unspoken question in them made Willow's breath catch. "And now?" she asked, hardly recognizing her own voice. "Now I'm beginning to think some risks are worth taking." His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, the gentle touch sending shivers up her arm. Before Willow could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats drew their attention. They separated quickly. Lucas, standing as a rider, appeared around the bend in the trail. It was one of the ranch hands, looking harried. "Miss Lockhart, Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Ellsworth sent me to find you. There's been an accident at the south pasture, a couple of hands injured when a bull charged the fence." Lucas was immediately alert. "How bad?" "Jackson's arm is broke for sure," and Martinez took a horn to the side. "Doc Sanders has been sent for, but Mrs. Ellsworth thought you might want to come back, Miss Lockhart, what with your aunt being needed to help until the doctor arrives." "Of course," Willow said, rising quickly. "We'll come right away." Lucas helped her mount. All business now as they followed the ranch hand back toward the main house at a brisk trot. The peaceful interlude by the creek seemed suddenly distant, like a dream interrupted. The ranch was in controlled chaos when they arrived. Martha, sleeves rolled up and a determined set to her jaw, was directing men to carry the injured Jackson into the bunkhouse. Martinez, pale but conscious, sat propped against the corral fence while one of the other hands pressed a cloth to his bloody side. Lucas dismounted quickly, handing his reins to a nearby stable boy. "What happened?" he asked the ranch foreman, a grizzled man named Frank who'd worked for Martha's husband for decades. "Damn bull broke through the fence," Frank explained. "New one we just bought from the Henderson place. Mean as a rattler with a toothache." Jackson and Martinez were trying to repair the fence when it came back for a second go. "Where's the bull now?" Lucas asked, eyes scanning the area. "Got him corralled in the south pen, but he's still riled. Might have to put him down if he doesn't settle." Lucas nodded grimly. "Let me help with the men first, then I'll take a look at that bull." Willow followed Martha into the bunkhouse, where Jackson lay on a narrow bed, his face gray with pain, his right arm bent at an unnatural angle. Without being asked, Willow rolled up her sleeves and moved to help, holding the man steady while Martha examined the break. "Clean break, thank goodness," Martha pronounced. "We need to set it before the swelling gets worse. Willow, there's a bottle of whiskey in that cabinet. Bring it here." For the next hour, Willow assisted her aunt and Lucas in tending to the injured men. Despite her sheltered upbringing, she didn't flinch from the blood or the grim work of setting Jackson's arm. When Martinez needed stitches before the doctor could arrive, she held the lamp steady, providing light while Martha worked with calm efficiency. Lucas moved between the two injured men, offering strength and reassurance. He helped hold Jackson still during the painful process of setting his arm, his deep voice a steady anchor as he told stories to distract the man from his pain. When Dr. Sanders finally arrived, he looked pleasantly surprised at the quality of care already provided. "Fine work, Martha," he said, examining Jackson's splinted arm. "And Mr. Martinez's stitches are neater than some I've seen done by army surgeons." "Don't look so surprised, Henry," Martha replied tartly. "I've been patching up cowboys longer than you've been practicing medicine in these parts." Once the doctor took over, Lucas turned to Willow, who was washing blood from her hands in a basin. "You did well in there," he said quietly. "Not many city ladies would have handled that without fainting." Willow dried her hands on a nearby towel. "My mother volunteered at the hospital in Boston. She sometimes took me along when I was old enough. I learned early that squeamishness helps no one." Admiration warmed his gaze. "You're full of surprises, Miss Lockhart." "Willow," she corrected with a small smile. "I think after setting bones and holding lamps for stitching, we can dispense with formalities." "Willow," he repeated, the name a caress on his lips. "I should see to that bull before there's more trouble. Will you be all right?" "Go," she assured him. "I'll stay with Aunt Martha and the doctor." Lucas hesitated, then impulsively took her hand and pressed a quick kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you for your help today. You've got grit, Willow Lockhart." Coming from him, it felt like the highest compliment she could receive. The incident with the bull marked a turning point in Willow's stay at the Circle E. Where before she had been primarily a visitor observing ranch life, but not participating in it now, she found herself increasingly involved in the day-to-day operations. Martha, impressed by her niece's calm handling of the emergency, began including her in more aspects of running the ranch. Lucas, too, became a more frequent presence. The bull that had injured the ranch hands was deemed too dangerous and was sold to a buyer who specialized in rodeo stock. But Lucas continued to visit the Circle E several times a week. Sometimes, he came with legitimate business, consulting with Martha about breeding stock or water rights, but increasingly, his visits seemed designed to coincide with times when Willow might be available. They fell into a pattern of afternoon rides whenever his duties at the Diamond Sea allowed. Each time, Willow's confidence on horseback grew, as did her feelings for the quiet, thoughtful cowboy who had saved her life. Their conversations ranged widely from books they had read to childhood memories, from the challenges facing cattle ranchers to Willow's experiences teaching music in Boston. 3 weeks after the bull incident, Lucas arrived at the Circle E with news. "Walter Coleman is heading to San Antonio for a Cattlemen's Association meeting," he told Willow as they rode along their now familiar trail to the creek. "He's asked me to accompany him. When do you leave?" Willow asked, trying to hide her disappointment. "Tomorrow morning. We'll be gone about a week." Lucas studied her face. "Will you still be here when I return? Your visit was only supposed to be for a month, wasn't it?" Willow nodded slowly. "Father's last letter did ask when I planned to return." The school term begins soon and they're holding my position for me." Lucas was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. "And what did you tell him?" "I haven't replied yet," Willow admitted. "I've been considering my options." They reached the creek and dismounted in what had become their usual spot. The late summer flowers were in full bloom along the banks, painting the landscape in vibrant yellows and purples. Willow trailed her fingers through the cool water, gathering her thoughts. "What options are you considering?" Lucas finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. Willow looked up at him, her heart pounding. "I'm not sure I want to go back to Boston, at least not permanently." Hope flickered in Lucas's eyes. "And what would keep you in Abilene?" This was it the moment to be brave, to take a risk. Willow took a deep breath. "You, Lucas, if you wanted me to stay." The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable. For a terrifying moment, Lucas just looked at her, his expression stunned. Then he moved, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. "Willow," he said, his voice rough with emotion as he took her hands in his. "I've been trying to find the courage to ask you to consider staying. I know we've only known each other a short time, but I can't imagine riding along this creek without you beside me." Joy bubbled up inside her. "Really? You're not just saying that because I spoke first?" A smile broke across his face, transforming it with warmth. "I've been half in love with you since I saw you holding that lamp steady while your aunt stitched Martinez. Completely in love since I watched you play the piano that night at dinner." "Oh," Willow breathed, her heart so full it hurt. "I think I started falling for you when you hummed that Cowboy song while we danced." Lucas raised a hand to cup her cheek, his touch gentle as a whisper. "May I kiss you, Willow Lockhart?" She nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Lucas leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was tender and reverent. His hand slid to the back of her neck, cradling her head as if she were something precious. Willow's arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer as the kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent, more profound. When they finally parted, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Willow. I know it's soon to say it, but I do." "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling right in a way she couldn't explain. "It's madness, isn't it? 6 weeks ago, I didn't know you existed." "Maybe," he agreed, brushing a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "Or maybe when something's right, you just know it." They sat by the creek for hours, talking about possibilities. Lucas spoke of his plans for the future, his growing stake in the Diamond Sea, his dream of one day having his own ranch. Willow shared her concerns about leaving her father alone in Boston, about abandoning her teaching position with no notice. "I'm not asking you to decide everything today," Lucas assured her. "I know you have responsibilities, people who depend on you. But I want you to know that I'm serious about us. When I get back from San Antonio, I'd like to speak with your aunt officially and write to your father." Willow's eyes widened. "Are you proposing?" Lucas smiled, taking her hand. "Not yet. That deserves a proper moment, not a hasty conversation before I leave town. But I want to make my intentions clear. I want to court you properly, Willow, with your family's blessing." The traditional approach touched her deeply. It was so like Lucas, honorable, respectful, yet with an underlying passion that made her pulse quicken. "I'd like that very much." The week of Lucas's absence was the longest of Willow's life. She threw herself into ranch activities, helping Martha with accounts and even assisting the hands with gentling a new filly. In the evenings, she wrote long letters to her father, trying to explain her changing feelings about Texas and the man who had captured her heart. Finally, she penned the letter she'd been avoiding: her resignation from the Boston Ladies' Academy, where she'd taught for 3 years. It felt momentous, closing that chapter of her life, but also strangely liberating. When Lucas returned from San Antonio, he rode straight to the Circle E, arriving dusty and travel-worn but with a light in his eyes that made Willow's heart soar. Martha discreetly excused herself, leaving them alone in the parlor. "I missed you," Willow said simply, as Lucas took her hands in his. "I thought of you every minute," he replied, bringing her fingers to his lips. The meeting was interesting. There's talk of new rail lines that could change the cattle business, but all I wanted was to be back here with you. They spent the afternoon walking the grounds of the Circle E, catching up on the events of the week they'd been apart. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Lucas led Willow to a small rise overlooking the ranch. "I spoke with your aunt this morning," he told her, his expression suddenly serious. "Asked for her blessing to court you formally." Willow's pulse quickened. "And what did she say?" "She said she's never seen you happier than you've been these past weeks, and that if I was the cause of that happiness, she had no objections." He took a deep breath. "I also sent a telegram to your father yesterday." Surprise flickered across Willow's face. "You did? What did it say?" "That I've fallen in love with his daughter and would like his permission to court her with honorable intentions." Lucas looked slightly sheepish. "It was expensive telegrams charged by the word, but I wanted him to hear from me directly." Touched by his consideration, Willow squeezed his hand. "Thank you for that. It will mean a lot to him." Lucas nodded, then reached into his pocket. "I have something for you. It's not an engagement ring, not yet, but it is a promise." He opened his palm to reveal a delicate silver band with a small pearl set into it. "It was my mother's," he explained. "One of the few things of hers I still have. I'd like you to wear it as a token of my intentions if you're willing." Tears welled in Willow's eyes as she looked at the simple, beautiful ring. "Lucas, yes, of course I'll wear it." He slid the ring onto her right hand, a promise ring, not yet an engagement. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "When the time is right, and your father has given his blessing, I'll have a proper engagement ring made," Lucas promised. "But I wanted you to have something to remind you of my feelings while we wait." Willow looked up at this man who had so unexpectedly changed her life, her heart full to bursting. "I don't need reminders," she told him softly, "but I'll treasure this always." Lucas pulled her close, sealing his promise with a kiss that spoke of a future together, of morning coffee and evening rides, of shared work and shared dreams, of a love that had sparked in a moment of danger and grown into something enduring and true. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Boston. Willow's hands trembled as she opened it, Lucas sitting beside her for moral support. Her father's elegant handwriting filled 3 pages, and she read it aloud so Lucas could hear. The letter began with concern and confusion. Why would his daughter consider abandoning her position and remaining in Texas? But as she continued reading, his tone shifted. He wrote of his own courtship of Willow's mother, how they had met and married within 2 months, shocking their families but building a love that lasted until death parted them. "If this cowboy of yours has captured your heart so completely," her father wrote, "then I cannot in good conscience stand in your way. Your mother would have said that love, true love, is too rare and precious to sacrifice for convention's sake. I require only 2 things. First, that you bring him east to meet me before any wedding takes place, and second, that you are absolutely certain he is worthy of you." Tears streamed down Willow's face as she finished reading. "He says yes, Lucas. He's giving us his blessing." Lucas pulled her into his arms, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Then I have a question to ask you properly." He knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. "Willow Lockhart, from the moment I caught the reins of your runaway horse, I've been falling in love with you. Your courage, your kindness, your willingness to try new things. Everything about you calls to me. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Willow said through happy tears. "Yes, Lucas Caldwell, I will marry you." Their wedding took place the following spring, after Willow and Lucas had traveled to Boston to meet her father. Howard Lockhart had been initially reserved, studying Lucas with a father's protective scrutiny. But by the end of their visit, he had warmed to the earnest cowboy who so clearly adored his daughter, even offering to help Lucas secure additional investment for his plans to expand his stake in the Diamond Sea. They married at the Circle E, with Martha hosting a celebration that brought together ranching families from 3 counties. Willow wore her mother's wedding dress, altered by Martha's skilled hands to suit the Texas climate. Lucas, resplendent in a new suit, watched her walk toward him with wonder in his eyes, as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Lucas's partnership with Walter Coleman flourished, eventually allowing him to buy out the older man's share of the Diamond Sea when Coleman decided to retire to San Antonio. Willow found a new purpose teaching music to the children of Abilene and surrounding ranches, her students performing recitals that became beloved community events. Their first child, a son they named Edward Howard after both their fathers, arrived a year after their wedding. A daughter, Margaret Rose, followed 2 years later, and another son, Thomas, 3 years after that. As their family grew, so did the Diamond Sea. Under Lucas's management, it became one of the most successful operations in the county, known for its progressive breeding programs and fair treatment of hands. Willow's father visited every summer, eventually becoming a familiar and beloved figure to his grandchildren and the ranch community alike. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Willow with a gift, a new piano for their home, ordered all the way from New York. That evening, after the children were asleep, she played for him the same Chopin nocturne she had performed the night they first danced together. "Any regrets?" Lucas asked as she finished playing, coming to sit beside her on the piano bench. "About leaving Boston, the life you might have had there." Willow looked at her husband, his face more weathered now, with strands of silver at his temples, but his amber eyes still warm with the same love that had captured her heart a decade ago. "Not a single one," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "That day when Penny ran away with me, it was terrifying in the moment, but it led me straight to you. How could I regret that?" Lucas smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Best day of my life, seeing you on that runaway horse. Scared me half to death, but it gave me the chance to be your hero." "You're still my hero," Willow told him softly. "Every single day." As they sat together in the home they'd built, surrounded by the life they'd created, Willow thought of how a single moment had changed everything: a frightened horse, a brave cowboy, and a rescue that had become the beginning of their love story. What had started in terror had blossomed into the greatest joy of her life, proving that sometimes the most unexpected journeys led to exactly where you were meant to be.